Welcome to the Word and Pen discussion. I am Zilch. At my right is my Bible called Love, and at my left is Zine, my pen.
Hello.
Today we will be discussing purgatory. Is it biblical, or something the church concocted for the sales of indulgences, with the famous quote acclaimed to be from Johann Tetzel that, as soon as the coin in the coffer rings, a soul from purgatory springs. Before I begin, Zine will give us a syllogism, and Love will give us two Bible quotations, one from the Old Testament and the other from the New Testament to think about them.
Here is the syllogism. Premise 1, there will be neither sin, nor attachment to sin in heaven. Premise 2, we are still sinning, and attached to sin at the end of our earthly life. Conclusion, therefore, if anyone is to go to heaven, there must be a period between death and heavenly glory, in which the saved are cleansed of sin and their attachment to sin.
Here are the scripture passages to think about. The first one from the Old Testament, is about Saul consulting a medium to bring up from Sheol, the spirit of Samuel who had died, to know the outcome of the pending battle between the Israelites and the Philistines. I read, 1 Samuel 28:8-15. So Saul disguised himself and put on other garments, and went, he and 2 men with him, and they came to the woman by night. And he said, Divine for me by a spirit, and bring up for me whomever I shall name to you. The woman said to him, Surely you know what Saul has done, how he has cut off the mediums and the wizards from the land. Why then are you laying a snare for my life to bring about my death? But Saul swore to her by the Lord, As the Lord lives, no punishment shall come upon you for this thing. Then the woman said, Whom shall I bring up for you? He said, Bring up Samuel for me. When the woman saw Samuel, she cried out with a loud voice, and the woman said to Saul, Why have you deceived me? You are Saul. The king said to her, Have no fear, what do you see? And the woman said to Saul, I see a God coming up out of the earth. He said to her, What is his appearance? And she said, An old man is coming up, and he is wrapped in a robe. And Saul knew that it was Samuel, and he bowed with his face to the ground, and did obeisance. Then Samuel said to Saul, Why have you disturbed me by bringing me up? Saul answered, I am in great distress, for the Philistines are warring against me, and God has turned away from me and answers me no more, either by prophets or by dreams, therefore I have summoned you to tell me what I shall do. The second one is when Jesus, while his body was in the tomb during the 3 days, his spirit descended to preach to the spirits in prison from Noah's time. I read, 1 Peter 3:18-22. Christ himself died once and for all for sins, the upright for the sake of the guilty, to lead us to God. In the body he was put to death, in the spirit he was raised to life, and, in the spirit, he went to preach to the spirits in prison. They refused to believe long ago, while God patiently waited to receive them, in Noah's time when the ark was being built. In it only a few, that is 8 souls, were saved through water. It is the baptism corresponding to this water which saves you now, not the washing off of physical dirt but the pledge of a good conscience given to God through the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who has entered heaven and is at God's right hand, with angels, ruling forces, and powers subject to him.
Wow. Very interesting.
Yes. Is very interesting indeed. I bet there are a lot of questions to be asked about these passages. For instance, from where was Samuel brought up to talk with Saul? And, where were the spirits in prison that Jesus went to preach to? Why were those spirits in prison even after they have died? Why did Jesus went to preach to those spirits in prison if they would not be saved? And so on. With these in mind, let us look at what the doctrine of purgatory entails. What is purgatory? Zine, can you help us with the definition?
Okay, purgatory is from the Latin, purgare, which means to make clean, or to purify. Thus from the conclusion of the syllogism I gave, the doctrine holds that there is a period between death and heavenly glory, in which the saved are cleansed of sin and their attachment to sin. The Catholic Encyclopedia states that, Purgatory is a place or condition of temporal punishment for those who, departing this life in God's grace, are not entirely free from venial faults, or have not fully paid the satisfaction due to their transgressions. I think where the doctrine can be found explicitly in Scriptures is in 2 Maccabees 12, 43-45, where Judas Maccabees took money and sent it to the Jerusalem temple to have a sacrifice of sin offered for the dead.
2 Maccabees 12:43-45. After this he took a collection from them individually, amounting to nearly 2,000 drachmas, and sent it to Jerusalem to have a sacrifice for sin offered, an action altogether fine and noble, prompted by his belief in the resurrection. For had he not expected the fallen to rise again, it would have been superfluous and foolish to pray for the dead, whereas if he had in view the splendid recompense reserved for those who make a pious end, the thought was holy and devout. Hence, he had this expiatory sacrifice offered for the dead, so that they might be released from their sin.
The Bible states that it was because of his belief in the resurrection. Now all of us Christians believe in the resurrection, and we have already seen that Saul consulted a medium to call Samuel's spirit and that Jesus descended in his spirit to preach to the spirits in prison from Noah's time.
Yes, we also know that Jesus Christ resurrected from death bodily. In fact, Matthew 27:51-53 makes us aware that, when Jesus resurrected from death, many holy people rose bodily from their tombs and entered Jerusalem the holy city, and appeared to a number of people. Matthew 27:51-53. And suddenly, the veil of the sanctuary was torn in two from top to bottom, the earth quaked, the rocks were split, the tombs opened and the bodies of many holy people rose from the dead, and these, after his resurrection, came out of the tombs, entered the holy city and appeared to a number of people. One may ask, where were these people?
I think this has a link with the passage we read from 1 Peter 3:18-20, and they were part of the spirits in prison. Thus if they did not need salvation, Jesus would not have gone to preach to them the gospel of salvation, and subsequently resurrect them from death when he rose from death.
But, does it mean after these, there are therefore no spirits in this prison, whose venial faults have led them there after Jesus' resurrection, and hence no one is there in needs of our prayers to redeem them like how Judas Maccabees prayed for the dead?
I don't think so. St. Paul in 1 Corinthians 3:11-17 makes us aware that everybody's work will be tested by fire, which obviously is the fire of purgation, to get to the standard set by Jesus Christ.
1 Corinthians 3:11-17. For nobody can lay down any other foundation than the one which is there already, namely Jesus Christ. On this foundation, different people may build in gold, silver, jewels, wood, hay or straw, but each person's handiwork will be shown for what it is. The day which dawns in fire will make it clear, and the fire itself will test the quality of each person's work. The one whose work stands up to it will be given his wages, the one whose work is burnt down will suffer the loss of it, though he himself will be saved, he will be saved as someone might expect to be saved from a fire. Do you not realize that you are a temple of God with the Spirit of God living in you? If anybody should destroy the temple of God, God will destroy that person, because God's temple is holy, and you are that temple. So Jesus is the standard and our righteousness must match his. The point is, our body is the temple of God, we must build it to the standard of Jesus's, confer John 2:21.
Yes, but the interesting thing is that, there are three types of people or builders. The first is from verse 14, and concerns those who build solidly. The second is from verse 15, and concern those who build in non-resistant materials. And the last or third is from verse 17 and concerns those who destroy the temple instead of building. Now the first person will receive his wage, which is obviously heaven, the second with non-resistant materials will have to suffer for it and be saved through fire, while the one who did not build, will be completely destroyed, and this is obviously hell. There is a parable Jesus gave about the faithful or the unfaithful slave, that also talks about purgatory, that if we do close reading like what we have done concerning Paul's passage, we will understand why it is important for us to pray for the dead or those in purgatory.
It is better to always read the text. Love, can you read the passage for us?
Luke 12:41-48.
Luke 12:41-48. Peter said, Lord, do you mean this parable for us, or for everyone? The Lord replied, Who, then, is the wise and trustworthy steward whom the master will place over his household to give them at the proper time their allowance of food? Blessed that servant if his master's arrival finds him doing exactly that. I tell you truly, he will put him in charge of everything that he owns. But if the servant says to himself, My master is taking his time coming, and sets about beating the men servants and the servant girls, and eating and drinking and getting drunk, his master will come on a day he does not expect and at an hour he does not know. The master will cut him off and send him to the same fate as the unfaithful. The servant who knows what his master wants, but has got nothing ready and done nothing in accord with those wishes, will be given a great many strokes of the lash. The one who did not know, but has acted in such a way that he deserves a beating, will be given fewer strokes. When someone is given a great deal will be demanded of that person. When someone is entrusted with a great deal, of that person even more will be expected. So just as Peter was given the key to be in charge of the Church of Jesus Christ, we each are given the authority over our bodies, which obviously as the temple of God belongs to him who is our master, and we merely stewards. But there are 4 stewards mentioned here, 1 faithful steward, 1 wicked steward, 1 unprepared steward and 1 ignorant steward.
Yes, the first steward is a faithful servant, who knows his master's will and does it. The master will give him everything he owns. This is obviously imagery of heaven. Thus this steward will enter the heavenly kingdom. The second steward is a wicked servant, who knows his master's will but is not concerned about doing it. When the master comes, he will cut him off or cut him in two, and send him to the same fate as the unfaithful. This is obviously the imagery of hell. Thus this steward will be sent to hell. Now the rest of the 2 stewards, the one unprepared, who know his master's will, but did not do it accordingly, and the one who is ignorant and did not do the will of the master accordingly, both will be beaten, but the unprepared will be beaten severely than the ignorant. These are the stewards we are talking about. This is the group who are been purged at purgatory.
Finally, to add, St. Paul in 2 Timothy 1:16-18, prayed and asked that God should have mercy on his dead friend Onesiphorus. 2 Timothy 1:16-18. May the Lord grant mercy to the household of Onesiphorus, for he often refreshed me, he was not ashamed of my chains, but when he arrived in Rome he searched for me eagerly and found me. May the Lord grant him to find mercy from the Lord on that day, and you well know all the service he rendered at Ephesus. In the Church's teaching, the Church is made up of 3 states. We have the Church triumphant, which refers to the saints or those in heaven, the Church militant, which refers to the Church on earth, and the Church suffering, which refers to those suffering in purgatory. Those suffering in purgatory are part of the Church and need our prayers. Let's remember them in our prayers.